If you're anything like me, then you're one of those annoying people that likes to correct people when they misidentify an animal. Of course, it's completely fine to misidentify an animal, but today I will be trying to help with this very important issue. In this video, I will be going through quite a few animals that are often confused for one another, and the difficulty will increase as the video goes on. Some of these examples are very easy and some are almost impossible, and we'll kick things off with two reptiles. Crocodiles and alligators are often confused for one another, but if you know what you're looking for, these animals are quite easy to tell apart. There are two species of alligator alive today, the American alligator and the Chinese alligator. These two species look very similar to each other, but they're found in two completely different parts of the world. Crocodiles, on the other hand, are more widespread, and there are far more crocodile species than alligator species. There are 18 extant species of crocodile that roam this planet today, but there are also some crocodilians that are members of the alligator family. The caimans do look very similar to alligators, and even though they are part of the alligator family, they are not alligators. These crocodilians are mostly found in Central and South America, and there are a few ways to tell the difference between caimans, crocodiles, and alligators. Caimans and alligators mostly have a U-shaped snout, and crocodiles have more of a V-shaped snout. Alligators tend to have flatter heads than caiman, and caimans tend to have larger, sharper teeth. On the internet, almost anything crocodilian shaped is called a gator, but hopefully now some of you will be able to tell the difference if you didn't know already. The next two groups of animals we will be taking a look at are the apes and the monkeys. It's extremely common in movies and on TV shows to call this animal a monkey, but as I'm sure many of you know, this animal is a chimpanzee and chimpanzees are apes. Apes are found in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, and they're generally split into two groups: the great apes and the lesser apes. The term lesser apes only refers to gibbons, which are the most monkey-like of the apes. The great apes are much easier to identify as they are very human-like, and of course we are a part of this family. Monkeys, on the other hand, tend to be a lot smaller, and one of the biggest differences is that most monkeys have tails. This is one of the easiest ways to tell these two groups of animals apart, but in some cases we do like to make it a little more confusing. Some monkeys are called apes, such as the Barbary ape and the black ape, but of course these two species are both old world monkeys. So even though we like to make it difficult, it's easy once you know what you're looking for, and once you know, you'll probably never make the mistake again. The next two animals we will be taking a look at are dugongs and manatees. Dugongs and manatees are in the same order, and they do live very similar lives to each other. They are both very calm and gentle creatures, and they like to spend most of their time feeding on aquatic vegetation. Dugongs are mostly found along the coasts of the Indo-Pacific, whereas the three species of manatee can be found in quite a few places around the world. Manatees tend to spend more time in freshwater ecosystems, whereas dugongs are more of a marine species. Thankfully, there is one very easy way to tell these two animals apart, and that's by looking at their tails. Manatees have large paddle-shaped tails, whereas dugongs have fluked tails like whales. These two groups of animals are both very fascinating creatures, and hopefully now it's easier to tell them apart. The next two animals we will be taking a look at are the jaguar and the leopard. Now this is possibly the most famous example of two animals that are often confused for one another, and it's a topic that I've brought up many times on the channel before. One of the easiest ways to tell these two animals apart is their distribution. Jaguars are found in North, Central, and South America, whereas leopards can be found across Africa and Asia. Jaguars and leopards have very similar markings, and both of these cats can be black in colour. It's much more common for a jaguar to be black than it is for a leopard to be black, and black leopards are less likely to be completely black. Jaguars tend to have larger, more distinctive rosettes, and they tend to have shorter fur than leopards. In my opinion, one of the best ways to tell these two animals apart is by looking at their heads. Jaguars have very large, chunky, muscular heads, whereas the leopards' heads are a lot thinner. This rule is the same when you look at the rest of the body, as leopards are generally less muscular and more slender. So even though it seems hard at first, it's actually quite easy, as these two cats have quite a few differences. The next two groups of animals we will be taking a look at are the turtles and the tortoises. For the most part, these two groups of animals are quite easy to tell apart, as turtles are more aquatic than tortoises. If you see a turtle-shaped creature in the ocean, it's a turtle. But if you see a turtle-shaped creature on land, it's most likely to be a tortoise. Unfortunately, this rule isn't definite, as there are some turtles that look like tortoises. Freshwater turtles spend time on land and in the water, and they can look very similar to marine turtles and land tortoises. Turtles tend to have thinner, more water-dynamic shells, and if they spend any amount of time in the water, they are most likely turtles. Tortoises spend the majority of their life on land, and they're mostly found in desert ecosystems or on island ecosystems. Hopefully this was a little help, but these two groups of animals can be quite difficult to tell apart. The next two groups of animals we will be taking a look at are the sea lions and the fur seals. These two groups of animals are very difficult to tell apart, and this is easily the most difficult example yet. Both of these creatures are perfectly adapted to marine ecosystems, and they spend most of their time feeding on a wide range of marine creatures. Fur seals are much more closely related to sea lions than they are to true seals, and this explains why they look so similar to each other. There are quite a few species of sea lion dotted around the world, and in a lot of cases their ranges overlap with fur seals. This makes it even harder to tell the two groups of animals apart, but there are a few subtle differences. Fur seals tend to be smaller on average, and they also have much thicker fur to keep them warm. In most cases, the ears and eyes of the fur seals are more pronounced, and they tend to have shorter skulls. These are some of the few ways to tell them apart, but as they are so closely related, it's hardly a shock. The final two groups of animals we will be taking a look at are goats and sheep. At first, it may not seem very hard to tell the difference between a goat and a sheep, but that's because we think of the domesticated farm animals. Wild goats and sheep can look very different to the domesticated animals, and it can be very hard to tell them apart. Some wild sheep look just like goats, and some wild goats look just like sheep. There are also hundreds of breeds of sheep and goat, and it's a similar story with these animals too. There are a few ways to tell these animals apart, and one of the ways is by looking at their tails. Sheep's tails tend to hang downwards, whereas goats' tails stand erect. Goats also tend to have beards, but it's extremely rare for a sheep to have a beard. This makes it slightly easier to identify them, but it's not hard to make a mistake. Of course, there are plenty of other animals that I could have included in this video, so if you know of any, then let me know down in the comments below. But for now, thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye.